now come to board. You might as well get across. Is there any vision in this? Do you want to comment on that?
Thank you very much. This is a literature list of books. It will be treated just like regular literature, mathematics, as part of the instruction. An opt-out policy is not necessary.
Thank you.
So I'd like to follow up in regards to that. I've had 4 children in high school, and throughout the time that I've had children in this district, we do receive a list at the beginning, especially in middle and high, of what books will be read, and I've always been able to ask a teacher, could there be another book substituted for any book, and been able to exchange a book like that. Where it's so in regards to this, not necessarily formal opt-out, but if a parent approaches the teacher and says that they would prefer not one book, a particular book, but that could some other book, an alternative book, be offered, are you saying that that will not be made available? Because I know we do that throughout actually I've actually had that done, not on these issues because this is a new thing, but in my family we do very little TV. So violence, when we've had books and movies of a violent nature, and I have always been able to say that I know that at least and I've had one child in particular of the 4 that I think is just more sensitive for whatever reason, and it's never been a big deal. In fact, we've had a policy where if she got uncomfortable, that I wouldn't even have to write a note or anything. She could just go up to tell the teacher that she wants to step out for a minute or whatever, and she's been able to do that. So I would think, so that's what I'm wondering, is if that policy would not apply to these books?
I don't believe it would.
Any other questions? I do want to clarify for the board, the resolution is number 10-0041, but it should be 40.
Thank you, Ruben. Thank you for all your hard work, and thank you for in this process. It has been somewhat divisive. It's been instructive and educational. What we're doing is to educational experience for our students. Doing so has been a tremendously educational experience for me, and I can see people in the community from the comments have been educational. I want to ask you a few questions. I really appreciate the slide here, the PowerPoint, and the I want to input and suggest things that any HMR contains many books. For a number of these books are addressed with but we've seen reading there are completely and then we also see that 1 and 2 under religion, general religion, or so would it be correct to say that in grades K there wouldn't be any books available in our currently adopted curriculum gender, religion.
Yes.
So, and I guess then from there we went to, we had the group, we had the literature list, and we came up with this, with looking at all, a number of books. Although it hasn't been, has me that we've come down to a list that fills in the blanks.
Yes, that is correct.
That because our discussions, I did really to adopt protect classes. We can see it. We have from so I appreciate that. I also with regard to do some research group identify that there are there remain government I understand somewhat. I know that it's but as well as orientation. I for all grades for grade K and well, I'm on the chart and I'm missing advice now to support this research in addition to safety, religion, gender. I like it. We have teachers and from our class administrators, but the going on is with orientation, disability, and race. I think it's really good start. I want to I just talked about on the these curriculum developed to April 12th at the next.
That's correct. We taught it inappropriate. Almost like the end. There will be an appropriate piece.
Augment and supplements to the similar to the curriculum, just respect and tolerance for all of these.
Yes, that's correct.
So, I wouldn't encourage and to just make that clear. That's where I think that one of these books says, well, bully that person because of their class. As a parent, having would not make sense, and it wouldn't do possible. Sex definitions of and that's important. So saying left, that there are first graders who may be more able to books, but none of them have any of them discussion, and these books a child back and say that's really I can't about family about what shouldn't think. Yes, that's why questions about
Student board.
Excellent job. The next step, a great amount of time to use staff development and the creative issues. Like many people, when you talk about the staff to
Thank you. Adaptive, almost in any case, and teachers a flow of information that are there. That I'm in the ED specialist that I could say about was sitting around folks in one room reading a book or circle about was developed that and teacher together read the book, vocabulary, your multiple sides of the some sort of is actually implemented in class.
Thank you. Were done well versus so here that probably has to be that time beginning. That is other specific questions. Resolution, so we can
so unified teachers, they have online so that anyone can view it whenever they want. It's valid online for sure. People can review it. You can put it at home in advance. That's a great idea, and pardon me that.
Thank you for sharing that. I have an answer for you immediately. I think as we're moving digital age, Many of the materials that we have are online and
positive but all that historically. So it went through the civil rights movement. I'm not discussing the African American was not included in this.
my heart. Actually, have all the books that we reviewed. That was one of my favorites as well because it had an extremely positive message. Race actually has quite a bit of information on race, list grade by grade with you, but basically, if we were holding true with the charge of filling gaps and making sure
things like that, and that's
might in the Rhoda Mifflin reading series at grade 5 in the and she's the first base of those of you may a teacher who is in the Challenger Blue really opened the eye of a lot of people that one, and two, that it just so happened that American part of what you had spoken about in terms of how the reading series is used. Is there a beginning of a story, middle of a story, an end of a story? This would actually allow for a clear conversation among students and their teacher about what does it really mean in these particular areas, and ask students to imagine a pretty narrow able to tell him to be any different than any other young man in civic community. And so there are contexts in which students live and families live that necessarily always integrate nicely.
okay. Thank you. In regards to the books on gender and gender identity, for instance, Fire Engine for Ruthie, my recollection, and by the way, I read all the books. In that book, my recollection is, and the best way to describe it, roles of a girl. In fact, what it has is a girl that does not want to have to do is play with the boys' toys that make noise. And a concern I have is that these books, not all of them, but that end up putting down something to elevate something else. And I'd like to have tea, and boys too for that matter, in our kindergarten classrooms, and like that, where we're putting down some things that children do in order to be successful. Will that be addressed that we can, in fact, girls play with balls or have tea and not feel now they're going to be bullied to do that?
Thank you for coming up, and all board members who do want to thank community members as well. It was very nice to see our friends and neighbors coming upstairs to read materials and to what's being presented. In Fire Engine for Ruthie, there are actually a couple of messages in that particular story. One is Ruthie, who would like to play with fire engines and noisy toys, and what most people would say would be male gender specific boy toys. Respect for her grandmother, because it's actually Ruthie who is actually following through with what her grandmother is doing out of respect, and rather than being disrespectful, goes along with what her grandmother originally plans for Ruthie. On the other hand, your question about are there traditional role models, traditional activities for girls and boys to see as well in the literature. So a good example of where the Houghton Mifflin reading series does a good job is in the story of Michelle Kwan. Ice skating is, generally many times considered a favorite of, I don't know how to say that because I don't want to come out sounding gender biased in any way, but Michelle Kwan is what a lot of little girls could see themselves as ice skaters. And Michelle's Kwan story is not only a nationally ethnic story, but it's also a story of success. It's a story of following through on trials and tribulations, but it also identifies something that many little girls aspire to as well, that she has in herself become a hero to many aspiring female skaters.
Okay, but my question really went to, which I appreciate the story about Michelle Kwan. My concern is that you have girls in these classrooms, and you're going to be reading this book, that do like to have tea and like to play with dolls. Do we have any books that go to that, or how will that be addressed so that they do not become targets as a result of trying to?
Yes, so thank you. And maybe I may have heard the question wrong, so I'll try a little bit different answer. So I think as the teachers create the lessons, hearing the concerns that you do, what about little girls who would like to have tea parties? I think that's actually a conversation that teachers can think about and actually have the gift of trying to make sure that little girls or little boys who do different type of activities, they can draw that out as well. And I think one of the real issues is, each child is an individual with a unique personality, a unique background, unique gifts. And I think our teachers are really wonderful at being able to draw out those gifts in each child. And I think that's one thing that we're really pleased with here in Alameda and blessed with.
Okay, but so as far as you know, Houghton Mifflin doesn't have any stories with the girls doing the traditional things to offer both perspectives of what children can do.
No, I wouldn't. I mean, would you like me to go through and?
That's all right. I just want to. I want to move on.
Can I respond? Actually, I have a direct response to that because I was in the classroom today. If that's okay, with the chair and board members' permission.
Fine.
I actually do reading groups in 3rd grade at Edison School twice a week, and this came up earlier. A commenter had brought this up as well about traditional. Why aren't there any traditional books on this list? And in classrooms, in my experience, in my elementary school, all the teachers have bookshelves in K through 5, and they have books in my classroom, in Ms. Basie's classroom. These books are in tubs, and they say animals or countries or adventure or things like that. And so, in addition to those books, I bet there's 500 books in the 3rd grade classroom, which are not all part of Houghton Mifflin, as far as I know. These books come from book fairs, they come from donations, they come from the teacher choosing them. So there's a lot of books available in the classroom that on a wide variety of subjects. And in addition to that, we're doing Houghton Mifflin reading support in the classroom, which is using books that are traditional books. One of the books I think we're using is Kenny and the Dragon, and then there's another one that was called No Talking. And these are books about, one of them was about the fifth grade girls versus the fifth grade boys, and let's not talk to each other. And it was traditional roles. Well, girls do this, and the girls are out there on the playground, and they're gossiping, and which is maybe a girl thing or not. And the boys are out there playing sports, and they're not talking. So these all had traditional themes, but they were books used by me, by a lay person in the classroom, helping teach reading to third graders. Kenny and the Dragon similarly was about a family of rabbits who was the mom and the dad and the baby rabbit who were, doing their thing. We're only on the second chapter, but it's a traditional family for sure. And I'm familiar with many other books that are being used on a daily basis that my son tells me about that are traditional families doing more, well, I hate to say traditional, but male-female relationships with children doing more traditional things, I guess you would say, in terms of the contrast with these gender books. So I can say with certainty, and I guess we also have some teachers in the audience who might be able to comment on that as well, but I know that we do have these books that do portray and illustrate traditional roles that are different from the ones that are missing that are on this list.
So I would agree, being pretty familiar with middle school through elementary school. I must say I don't know the high school library that well, but our schools are full of quote-unquote traditional American families and roles, and just because you can't name a book that might be on the shelf doesn't mean they're not there. That there are tons of them. My Jillian is currently reading Anne of Green Gables series, and certainly that's a traditional girl role book if you take a look at it that way.
Actually, my question didn't go to what books are on the shelves, because I know we have many books on shelves. What I'm speaking to is curriculum, where a teacher will be teaching from a book, which is different from having a book on a shelf. So I appreciate that we have many books on shelves. I'm concerned about what actually. So, but let me move on, because I'm going to ask your questions later. Paperback. My recollection, and for those of you that aren't familiar with it, there's a prince and a princess, but at the end, the princess actually reverses roles, in that she becomes sort of the bully and looks at where she felt like she'd been being bullied, but she looks at the boy and says, "You're a bum," and ends whatever chance he thought he would be marrying her. And I'm going to say it real quickly, but introduce that. And I am a little concerned about, language like that being introduced. How you resolve something when you're happy is you call a boy a bum because you don't like the way he, the way the relationship was going or whatnot. Many of us don't use language like that in our homes or whatnot, and so. Again, I have a question about, so when you have a book like that, or another book like that, where the victim becoming sort of a bully, do name calling, how will that be dealt with, or is that something that you think will be addressed in the lesson?
I actually think that it could, and I think the interesting thing, and I hope this might be able to answer many of the questions, both from yourself and community